My name is Mark, and for as long as I can remember, the scent of sawdust and fresh-cut pipe has been the smell of my life. I'm 46 now, but I started my plumbing business with my brother, David, when I was fresh out of trade school. We built it from nothing, sweat and skin knuckles turning a rusty old van into a thriving enterprise. By the time I hit 29, I owned a small 3-bedroom house outright, a rare achievement in our town, a testament to hard work and saving every spare dime. It was a good life, quiet and simple, just the way I liked it. Then, at a neighborhood cookout when I was 31, I met Sarah. She was 27, a single mom with big, wary eyes and a laugh that felt like sunshine. Her daughter, Lily, was a tiny wisp of a girl with a shy smile and pigtails that bounced when she ran. Her story was heartbreakingly common: a deadbeat ex, Eric, who had vanished when Lily was a toddler, leaving her to scrape by on a daycare worker's salary. I saw her vulnerability and her strength, and something inside me, a part I never knew existed, stirred to life. My first real memory of Lily is etched in my mind. She was 6, peeking out from behind Sarah's legs, her big brown eyes too shy to even whisper hello. Sarah nudged her gently, her voice soft with a knowing smile. "Lily, sweetie, this is Mark." Lily just shook her head and buried her face in her mom's jeans, a tiny anchor holding on to the only safe person she knew. But a few months into dating, a call came that changed everything. Sarah was working late, and Lily had taken a bad spill off her bike at daycare. The receptionist called me, and when I questioned it, she said, "Sarah listed you as Daisy's emergency contact." My heart hammered in my chest. I wasn't just Sarah's boyfriend anymore. In her mind, I was already a part of this family. I drove to the daycare, my hands tight on the steering wheel, and when I walked into the nurse's office, there she was, small and sniffling, her cheeks streaked with tears. "Hey, kiddo," I said, kneeling down. "Let's take a look at that battle wound." I grabbed the first aid kit and began to clean the scrapes. She winced, but her little hand found my shoulder and gripped it. When I stuck on a couple of cartoon bandages, the kind that glittered, she looked at them, then up at me with wet lashes. And then, out of nowhere, she whispered, "Thanks, Daddy." Not Mr. Mark, just Daddy. I froze. The word was a seismic shift. A lifeline thrown from a child's uncertain world to mine. It wasn't a mistake. It was a request. And in that moment, I knew there was no going back. That night, I told Sarah what Lily had said. She smiled, her eyes softening with a gratitude that felt like a warm embrace. "She's been asking for weeks if you were going to be her new dad," she confessed. "I think she was just waiting for the right moment." That moment was a watershed for me. I had never planned on having kids, but from that day on, Lily was mine. When she turned 7, Sarah and I got married. Lily insisted on being both the flower girl and the ring bearer, declaring with her hands on her hips like a tiny general, "It's my wedding, too." The whole room erupted in laughter, but to me, it wasn't a joke. It was the truth. She wasn't a burden I had inherited. She was family I had chosen. Those early years were golden. Saturday mornings became sacred rituals. Me and Lily at our favorite greasy diner, pancakes piled high, syrup dripping from her fork as we planned our next half-baked building project. "Dad, can we build a treehouse?" she'd ask, her eyes shining with pure hope. I'd grin back. "Sure, it might end up looking like a crooked shed, but we'll call it a treehouse." She'd laugh and cling to my arm like I was her entire world. She called me Dad like it was the most natural thing in the universe, and every single time it melted me. When she was 8, I started a college fund for her. I put money in religiously, a promise to her future that I took as seriously as any vow. My friends used to call me a saint for raising another man's kid, but I never saw it that way. She wasn't someone else's child, she was my daughter. I had chosen her, and that felt more powerful than any genetic bond. However, there was a quiet conversation I never forgot. When we were finalizing the legal aspects of our marriage and my role in Lily's life, I brought up formal adoption. Sarah's face clouded over. She had a lawyer draw up a document that gave me full parental rights, but stopped short of a legal adoption. She insisted it would be too much for Lily to handle, that the paperwork would just confuse her and might upset her real father, Eric, if he ever came back into the picture. Sarah was adamant that Lily should never be told that I was not her biological father. "Just let it be, Mark," she pleaded. This is our family secret. It's better this way." I trusted her. I had no reason not to. I signed the papers, believing I was protecting Lily from a complicated truth. The years rolled on and life was a smooth, well-oiled machine until Lily hit high school. At first, I wrote off her behavior as typical teenage angst. The eye rolls, the clipped responses, the hours spent locked in her room. "It's just a phase," I told myself, a mantra to get me through the silent dinners and averted gazes. But it wasn't a phase. It was a slow, deliberate erosion of our relationship, and the first major crack appeared the day she stopped calling me Dad. I was in the kitchen one evening rinsing dishes when she sauntered in. She didn't look up from her phone. "Mark, can you get me a water?" The word Mark hit me like a physical blow. It was casual, dismissive, as if she were talking to a stranger, not the man who had tucked her in at night and taught her how to ride a bike. My heart sank, but I didn't say anything, hoping it was a one-time slip. It wasn't. It only got worse. One night at Target, she turned to Sarah and said, "Can Mark buy me the nicer notebooks?" Her voice was laced with an entitlement that made my stomach churn. She spoke about me, to me, as if I were a ghost, a walking wallet she barely tolerated. I pulled her aside, my voice a tight whisper. "Why are you calling me Mark?" I asked. "I'm your dad." She just shrugged, her eyes rolling with practiced boredom. "Whatever, you know what I meant." I stood there, stunned, stung by her complete lack of empathy. When I tried to talk to Sarah about it, she brushed me off. "It's just teen stuff," she said with a sigh. "Don't be so hard on her." But it wasn't just teen stuff. Everything I provided for Lily, the shoes, the phone I saved for, was never enough. She wanted the $200 shoes, not the ones on sale. Her friends had designer bags, so why didn't she? And every time I tried to draw a line, Sarah rushed to her defense, undermining my authority. "She's just finding herself," she'd say, shaking her head at me. One afternoon, I was at a hardware store picking up supplies when I ran into a friend of Sarah's. We chatted for a moment, and she mentioned Lily's upcoming birthday. "Oh, that's so sweet of you to help out with her and Sarah," she said. "I know it's hard to find good guys who will be a solid uncle to a family like that." I froze. "Uncle?" I repeated, my voice hollow. She nodded. "Yeah. Sarah mentioned you're like her fun uncle who helps out." The betrayal washed over me like a cold wave. Sarah had been telling people I wasn't Lily's father, that I was just a hanger-on, a convenient bank account. That explained everything. It wasn't just Lily's disrespectful behavior, it was the story Sarah had been telling her and the world. The family secret wasn't to protect Lily, it was to protect Sarah's options. The friction between us became a constant static in the house, a low hum of resentment that finally erupted on Lily's 16th birthday. I had spent months saving for a reliable, safe car, a Honda Civic. It was practical, dependable, the kind of car I knew wouldn't leave her stranded. I wrapped the keys in a little box, trying to make the moment feel as special as I'd imagined it. When she saw the car in the driveway, she didn't smile or thank me. She didn't even fake it. She sneered. "Seriously, a Civic?" she scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "My friend Jenna got a BMW. Her stepdad actually cares." The word stepdad was a new insult, a subtle jab that felt like a pinprick to my soul. I forced myself to stay calm, my chest tight. "Lily, I wanted something safe, dependable. This is a good car. It'll last you years." She crossed her arms and glared at me, her eyes spitting fire. Then she said it, the words she'd been holding onto for years, a poisoned arrow aimed straight at my heart. My real dad would have understood. I stared at her, the words hitting me harder than a physical blow. My jaw clenched so tight I could feel the muscle ache. "Your real dad?" I finally managed, my voice a low, dangerous rumble. "You mean the same one who hasn't shown his face in a million years? The one who can't be bothered to send a birthday card?" She just rolled her eyes, as if her father's complete absence was a minor inconvenience, not a deep wound. The final gut-wrenching moment came later that night. We had some friends over, just a small dinner party with drinks and food on the patio. The night was easy, full of casual laughter until the topic of college savings came up. I mentioned with quiet pride that I'd saved enough to cover state school tuition. "She'll be set when the time comes," I said. That's when Lily came waltzing into the living room, phone glued to her hand. Without even looking up, she announced, Actually, I got into NYU. Mom and I already talked about it. News to me. I cleared my throat, keeping my voice steady. That's great. Lily, but we're going to need to talk about finances. The fund isn't enough to cover NYU's price tag. She stopped scrolling, her head snapping up. She looked at me with a mix of fury and contempt. You're so stingy. You always make me feel guilty about money. Maybe you shouldn't have married a woman with a kid if you couldn't handle it. Right there, in front of my friends, she exploded. Don't tell me what to do. You're not my dad. You're just some guy who pays for stuff. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to look her in the eye. Exactly. I'm just the guy who pays for stuff. The house you live in, the clothes you wear, the phone you hold so close to your face, the car you drive around town. She scoffed, and before I could say more, Sarah stepped in. Don't you lecture my child, she snapped, her voice like a whip. If you have to lecture someone, maybe you should have your own kids. The room went silent. My friends stared at me, their faces twisted with a mix of pity and horror. And Sarah, my wife of nearly a decade, put her arm around Lily and murmured, She's just stressed. Maybe we should end the night. Not a single word of correction, not a shred of defense for the man who had raised her daughter for 13 years. And that's when it hit me. The full scope of the betrayal, the intricate web of lies she had woven. It wasn't just me and Lily. It was Sarah's conscious decision to let me be the ATM, the convenient patsy, while she quietly encouraged her daughter's entitlement and sought out other options for her future. The tension in the room was a physical thing, suffocating and thick. My friends, sensing the impending explosion, muttered apologies and hurried out, leaving just me, Sarah, and a seething Lily. Sarah looked at me with a panicked expression, trying to backpedal. Mark, no, you don't understand, she began, but I cut her off. My brother, David, who had stayed behind, a silent witness to the entire humiliation, put a hand on my shoulder. Let's go, Mark, he said quietly, his eyes warning me to keep my temper in check. We'll talk later. I followed him out to the front porch, the cool night air a welcome relief. Did you hear that? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. She told me to have my own kids. After all this time, she just let Lily tear me down. David nodded, his face grim. I heard. Look, man, this is more than just a fight. This is a setup. It's been a setup for a long time. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Remember those legal papers you signed? The ones that gave you parental rights but weren't a full adoption? I nodded, a knot forming in my gut. Well, I got a little suspicious a few years ago and had a buddy in a law firm do some digging. That document was never fully submitted. You don't have a legal leg to stand on. The truth hit me like a sledgehammer. The whole time I had been operating under a lie, a carefully constructed facade that gave me all the responsibility of a father with none of the legal protection. So, what about the college fund? I asked, my voice hollow. Is that gone too? David shook his head. No, that's a separate entity. It's in a trust with your name on it. You can dissolve it anytime you want, no questions asked. A cold resolve settled over me. That fund wasn't just money. It was years of my life, a promise I had made to a little girl who no longer existed. That night, I made my decision. The next morning, I went to the bank, emptied the college fund, and transferred every cent into my retirement account. Then, I filed for divorce. Sarah was completely blindsided. What, Mark? No, you can't just walk away like this, she stammered, her eyes wide with panic. The carefully built victim act began. Think of everything we've built. Think of Lily. You can't just throw that away. She needs you. We need you. I shook my head, my voice devoid of emotion. No, Sarah. What Lily needs is a man who's willing to be her ATM, and you need a doormat. I'm not that guy anymore. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's time I had my own kids. Her face crumpled, her desperation shifting into a pathetic apology. I'm sorry, Mark. I should have handled things differently. I cut her off. Yes, you should have. But that ship has sailed. When Lily disrespected me, you didn't correct her. You scolded me. That told me everything I needed to know. Just then, Lily stormed in, her eyes blazing. You can't do this. We are family, she screamed. I looked at her, my gaze unflinching. Family? What family, Lily? I was just the guy who paid for stuff. I was never your father. Isn't that what you said? So go find your real father, your real family, because I'm done. My hands were steady, my voice like ice. "I'm filing for divorce because of you, Lily, because you disrespected me, and because of you, Sarah, because you enabled it. That's not a family, that's a setup. And I'm telling you this because the next time you try to trap some other man, Sarah, don't repeat the same mistake. A marriage without respect is already dead." I walked away, leaving them frozen in the living room, a silent monument to their own deceit. 5 years passed. My life, once a chaotic symphony of demands and conflicts, settled into a quiet, peaceful rhythm. I poured my energy back into the business, expanding it far beyond what David and I had ever imagined. We hired new crews, bought a fleet of vans, and moved into a new, state-of-the-art office. I sold the house I had shared with Sarah and bought a bigger one, a place that felt truly like mine, free from the ghosts of slammed doors and bitter arguments. Weekends were spent fishing, working on my own projects, and enjoying a silence that was no longer lonely but liberating. Then, one rainy afternoon, there was a knock on my door. I opened it, and my stomach dropped. There they were, like ghosts from a past life, Sarah and Lily. Lily looked hollow, older, the fire in her eyes replaced by a weary, guarded emptiness. Her shoulders were slumped, her hair limp and unkempt. Sarah looked desperate, clutching her purse strap like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She looked at me, and her eyes, once full of sun, were now filled with a watery plea. "Mark, please," Sarah began, her voice cracking. We need help." Lily didn't say a word, just stared at me, her lips trembling as if unsure whether to cry or spit. I raised an eyebrow, crossing my arms over my chest. "What happened?" I asked, my voice flat, betraying none of the turmoil inside. Sarah's voice was a whisper. "The money's gone, everything. The Honda got repossessed. Lily..." She dropped out of NYU after the first semester. We got a loan from a friend of hers for a semester's tuition, but we couldn't pay it back. I got remarried, but it didn't work out. He was a complete fraud. He drained my savings and vanished." She didn't have to say it. I knew. I had done my own research. Her new husband was Eric, Lily's biological father, who had resurfaced, charming them with promises of a grand life and a future at NYU, only to use them for their money before disappearing again. He hadn't changed. They had just learned a lesson I could have taught them for free. I let out a bitter, hollow laugh, shaking my head. "What do you expect me to do, Sarah? Trade you in for another round? I'm not a used car salesman. You don't just come back when the wheels fall off and ask me to fix it." My eyes shifted to Lily, the girl who used to press dandelions into my calloused hands, whispering, "Daddy, this one's for you." But all I could see was the teenager who had stood in my living room, sneering, telling me I wasn't her dad, that I was just some guy who paid for stuff. I took a breath, the air in my lungs steady and cold. "You told me I wasn't your father, Lily," I said, my gaze holding hers dead in the eye. "You were right." Her mouth fell open as if to speak, but no words came out. "Good luck," I said, and I closed the door. The sound of it clicking shut was final, an iron gate slamming on a chapter of my life I never wanted to revisit. I turned and walked away, the ghost of her childhood gaze following me down the hall. I stood there, listening to the desperate, muffled sobs from the other side of my closed door. But I didn't care enough to listen. I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down at my table, the silence now feeling like a deep, cleansing breath. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Mark, please, can we at least talk? She's still your daughter, no matter what she said." I stared at the message, a bitter smile on my face. She was still trying to rewrite history, to manipulate me into a role I had long abandoned. My thumb hovered over the screen. Finally, I typed back a single, brutal sentence. "No, Sarah. She made it clear I was never her father. You agreed. Now you live with the consequences." 5 minutes later, my brother David called, his voice a low chuckle. "You're trending, man," he said, a note of dark amusement in his tone. "What?" I asked, frowning. He explained. Sarah had taken to social media, posting a heart-wrenching photo of Lily at 6, running off a soccer field and hugging me around the waist. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. He raised her for 13 years and then turned his back when she needed him most. Money mattered more than love to him. My chest tightened, not with anger, but with a cold, righteous fury. I pulled up my phone, and there it was, a wave of digital rage directed at me. The comments were pouring in, half of them from her friends calling me a monster, the other half from strangers asking questions Sarah clearly didn't want to answer. She'd made a grave mistake. She had tried to frame me as a villain in a story I had the receipts for, literally. I had kept everything, every bank record showing payments for school trips, soap braces, and dance classes. I had the paperwork for the college fund I'd started when Lily was 8. I even had screenshots of text messages where she demanded luxury items and threatened to cut me off if I didn't comply. And most importantly, I had the legal documents for the fake adoption. Instead of replying online, I called Sarah directly. She picked up on the second ring, her voice shaky and full of feigned regret. "Mark, please, you don't understand," she began. I cut her off, my voice cold and hard. "No, Sarah, you don't understand. You and your daughter spent years draining me dry and treating me like trash. Then you humiliated me in my own home. And now that you're broke, I'm suddenly dad again? Sorry, but you don't get to rewrite history." There was silence on the line, followed by a faint sob. And then, from the background, the same entitled, poisonous voice I'd heard 1,000 times cut through. "Just tell him to give us the money. That's what he's good for." It was Lily. Sarah tried to muffle it, but it was too late. Any last flicker of sympathy I had for her evaporated in that instant. "Goodbye, Sarah," I said, my tone like ice. "And tell that girl. She started this. I'm finishing it." I hung up. That night, I opened my laptop and made a video. I laid out every piece of evidence, every receipt, every text, the legal papers, even screenshots of her post. I spoke straight into the camera, my voice steady, my story simple and backed by irrefutable proof. I exposed the fake adoption, the financial exploitation, and the humiliating betrayal. The video went viral. The internet never forgets. The video went viral faster than I could have imagined. Comments poured in by the thousands, not just from my friends, but from strangers, all calling out Sarah and Lily's entitlement and manipulation. People weren't buying their victim act anymore. They saw the truth, plain and ugly. Sarah deleted her original post, but the internet never forgets. My video was shared over and over, screenshotted and re-uploaded, a permanent record of their deceit. 2 weeks passed, and I didn't hear from them directly. But word traveled fast in our small town. My brother David came by one night, a six-pack in hand, the way he always did when he had news he knew I needed to hear. He set the bottles on the table with a heavy sigh and kicked off his boots. "Heard the latest?" he asked, cracking one open. I raised an eyebrow, bracing myself for the worst. "What now?" He took a long swig before answering. "Sarah lost her job. Daisy dropped out of NYU when the tuition bills piled up. They got evicted from their apartment and are living with one of Sarah's cousins." He paused, a hint of something complex in his expression. "They're being ghosted by everyone who defended them online now that the truth's come out." I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking beneath me. I didn't smile, didn't feel a surge of victory. Instead, a wave of profound closure washed over me. For years I had carried the weight of it all, the humiliation, the anger, the gnawing doubt that maybe I had failed. I used to replay the arguments in my head, searching for the right words, the moments where I could have held back and saved everything. But now, I saw the truth clearly. It was never just on me. It was a team effort that had been rigged from the start. I had been running hard, trying to give my daughter good values, but Sarah had always been there, cutting the legs out from under me, enabling Lily's entitlement, teaching her that consequences didn't apply. And in the end, that's what broke us. That realization didn't sting anymore. It felt like breathing out after holding my breath for years. We sat on the porch in comfortable silence, the setting sun painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples. David studied me for a long moment before speaking again. "You know, Mark," he said quietly, "you did fix everything in the end." I frowned, turning my head toward him. "What do you mean?" He gave me a faint smile. "You gave her a home when she didn't have one. You gave her a father when she needed one most. And when she threw it away, you gave her the lesson life was always going to teach her anyway, that nothing is truly free. You did your job. The rest was on her." I stared out over the fading light, his words sinking in, and for the first time in years, I believed him. 5 years later, my life was truly my own again, a masterwork of peace and quiet I had carefully built. The plumbing business was thriving, my free time was spent fishing, and I had started a new hobby, woodworking. There were no slam doors, no constant battles, just the rhythmic hum of a life I had chosen for myself. Then, one rainy afternoon, fate played a cruel trick. I was leaving a supply store, a roll of duct tape in one hand and a receipt in the other, when I caught a glimpse of her across the street. It was Lily, a ghost from my past. She was waiting tables at a diner, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, an apron tied loose at the waist. She looked tired, not the kind of tired you fix with a nap, but a bone-deep, soul-weary exhaustion. Her shoulders slumped as she carried a tray, her eyes dull, her smile painted on like it cost her something every time she tried. She was a shadow of the bright little girl I once knew, the one who used to run through sprinklers in the backyard and laugh like the world couldn't touch her. Our eyes met through the diner window, just a flicker at first, but in that instant a flash of recognition hit both of us. She froze, tray in hand, and for a second it was like the noise of the diner faded out. The sound of plates clattering, people talking, the clang of a fork hitting the floor, all of it disappeared. She opened her mouth, almost like she wanted to say something. Maybe sorry, maybe help. I'll never know. She just stood there, staring, as if the weight of all those years sat heavy between us. The silence was deafening, a chasm between a past I had outrun and a present she was trapped in. My heart pounded against my ribs. I wanted to move, to go to her, to ask what happened. But a cold voice in my mind stopped me. The voice of reason, the one that had saved me from a life of financial ruin and emotional torment. I held my breath, waiting for her to come outside, to close the distance that her own choices had created. But she didn't move. She just stood there, staring. Finally, I gave her the smallest nod I could manage. Polite and distant, a sign of acknowledgement for a memory, not a person. Then I turned and walked away, because she was right. All those years ago, I wasn't her father. I was the man who chose to be her dad, and she chose to throw that away, and I never looked back. Later that night, my brother David came over, the usual six-pack in hand. He could see the tension in my face, the storm I was holding back. "You okay?" he asked, sitting down on the porch swing. I told him what happened about seeing Lily at the diner. He listened quietly, nodding slowly. "Did she try to talk to you?" he asked. "No," I said, the word a simple, brutal truth. "She just stood there, and I walked away." David didn't press. He knew me well enough to know that was the only possible outcome. He took a sip of his beer and stared out into the darkness. "You know, you could have gone over there," he said, his voice quiet. "You could have said something, given her a chance to apologize." I shook my head, my gaze fixed on the quiet street. Why? To what end? So she could apologize for a mistake that cost me a decade of my life? So she could ask for money again? No, David. The lesson wasn't for her to apologize to me. The lesson was for her to live with the consequences of her choices. That's the one thing Sarah never taught her. I took a breath, feeling the last vestiges of the bitterness drain away. Being a parent isn't just about putting a roof over someone's head or paying for their life. It's about respect. It's about teaching them that their choices have consequences. Sarah was always there, undermining me, enabling her entitlement, teaching her that she could get whatever she wanted without having to earn it. And in the end, that's what broke us. It wasn't about love, it was about values. And we never had the same ones. I felt no joy in their downfall, only a profound sense of justice and closure. The house was quiet, the air was cool, and for the first time in a long time, I felt no anger, no regret. I had done what was right, not just for myself, but for the man I was supposed to be. I had been a father, and she had chosen to throw that away. My job was done. And I knew, with a certainty that reached into the deepest part of my soul, that I had made the right decision.